Make Noise pressure points is an awesome tool to have in your rack. Most of the time you see it set up, it's just a 4-step sequence being clocked by brains. But if you use some modules with it, like a sequential switch and a clock divider and many others, you can really expand its possibilities. I had a gig coming up recently where it's sort of an ambient thing, and I wanted to center part of the patch around the pressure points controlling outputting voltages that correspond to chords. But I wanted to mix it up a little bit. I wanted to make it kind of pseudo-random, introduce some randomness to it, so the audience kind of never heard the same thing twice. So in this patch, I have the top 2 rows are tuned to voltages that are sent into the 1 volt per octave input of braids. And braids is on the wavetable X4 mode, which is basically a 4-voice chord mode. And the top two rows are going through a switch, and I'll talk about that in a second. And in this mode that braids is in, the timbre input is different wave shapes, which is the 2nd row currently. And then the color input is chord types, so like 3rd, 4th, major, minor, that kind of thing. And that's the bottom row. I just have that going right in, and I've just sort of selected ones that to taste that I like. Now, right now it's just 4 steps, kind of repeating over and over again. But with a sequential switch, you can introduce some interest to the sequence and have it take these 2 lanes of voltages, and by using the switch, you can decide which voltage gets sent into the pitch input. So that's what I have currently. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to in the RYO paths is a sequential switch I'm using, but you could also use the dope for sequential switch. You could use Eric Sense sequential switch. There's a bunch on the market. So I'm going to take channel 2 of Tempi, and I'm going to put that into the forward input. You hear it just changed it because when I selected it. Now, the 2nd row is going into the... Oh, it's actually now it's back to the 1st. Before it was the 2nd, but whatever. And I can change it with the forward button also manually. So what's happening here is basically these top 2 rows of voltages are effectively swapping, and they're getting sent into the pitch input. And so if I make that, if I make this output of Tempi a lot slower, it'll sort of, now out of phase with the sequence, swap rows at a kind of unpredictable amount. And I've made it like a sort of much slower than the rest of the sequence. So, and it's not even, it's not like it's just going to do 4 and then 4. It's going to switch every once in a while. I'm going to actually make it a little bit faster. And also, like, sometimes it'll change within a step of the other, since they're out of phase. You get that kind of portamento effect, which I like. And so that's sort of variation in pitch over time by using 2 lanes of pressure points. But let's also, since we have brains clocking pressure points, which is coming from channel 1, and I'll mention also that channel 1 is opening envelope of maths, channel 1, which is opening the Optimix, which is going into verb into my sound card. So that's the rest of the signal path. So we have sort of like notational variation over time, but I was interested in trying to have some rhythmic variation, kind of just to break it up even more and have it so that it wasn't sort of whole notes the whole time. So For that, I'm going to use this random module called the Qubit Nanorand. You don't have to necessarily use this one. I think the Wogglebug would work for this. Also, any of the West Coast sort of random source-based modules will work fine for this. So I'm going to take channel 3 and put it into the clock input of Nanorand. And so when you're clocking Nanorand externally, the gate output is a cool feature where it basically does random rhythmic divisions, and the main knob kind of controls the amount of random gates that are coming out of it. So we can take that gate out and let's put it into the direction. So now, sort of with randomness at random amounts, we'll get a change in direction. So now the chords will come in different times. And now, since the tempi has a mod function, we can even take this even further, where we have a couple channels with different timings. And also, I think the direction, I think I'm going to speed that up a bit. So now you can see it start to flash now. It's taking that clock, and we'll get kind of random direction changes in the sequence. I also have pre-patched in here from channel 6 into the mod input of the tempi itself. And if you don't have a tempi, I think you can probably approximate this with like the 4MS rotating clock divider. I think Pamela's workout would also do this. Where you can sort of take outputs and patch into it and have an input assigned to something like rotating steps. So I'm going to enable mod on these two channels, and the timing of those will now swap. So now this whole sort of patch is feeding back on itself. Timing changes are happening at different times, and it's creating some variation. I'm also going to make the mod input trigger faster. So now you can hear that like some steps are happening quicker, some steps are being allowed to sort of fully fade out, and their note kind of fade to total like silence. And this worked really well for me for my sort of ambient show, where it was like things didn't necessarily have to be perfectly in time. It was more just about vibes. By removing and adding channels to the mod, enabling, disabling mod on the tempi, you can sort of, over the course of the performance, affect how this randomness is being introduced to different aspects of the patch. So that's adding some interest and embellishing a simple 4-step sequence to make it a little bit more interesting.